let's say someone wanted to do a receiving line and all their family photos, and they have a really big family, and all their bridal party photos, but they have like an hour. That's not enough time for all of those things.
We know, we've lived through that as well.
If you're planning a wedding and want all the secret tips for a smoother wedding day experience, then stick around as we interview some of the top professionals in the wedding industry. We are Coastline Studios, a fun-loving team of filmmakers who specialize in creating custom wedding films alongside some extremely talented people. Welcome to Let's Talk Weddings. One of the keys to a stress-free wedding day is a good timeline, and after planning countless weddings, we couldn't be more eager to hear what Elise and Elizabeth from Posh Petals have to say when it comes to creating the perfect flow for a stress-free day.
So timelines, we're talking timelines today with Posh Petals. Thank you for being here today with us.
Yes,
and
thanks.
I'm sure you have a lot of insights, so let's just jump in. What are some timelines? Are they all created the same? Are they different? You know, what should people know about them?
Yeah, definitely. There's definitely differences. A lot of it has to do with photos and where those are going to be, whether people want a first look versus if they want to wait until the actual ceremony. A lot of times too, the venue will help decide like when ceremonies can be. You know, for example, if you're in a Catholic church, a lot of times those have time restrictions in the afternoon of when it has to be versus if you're at a different setting when maybe it has to be at 5 or 6 o'clock. That can really affect a timeline and help impact the general flow, because if someone wants to have their ceremony at 5 or 6 o'clock but they want to wait and do all their photos afterwards, you end up with a much narrower time frame when you have to get a lot of stuff done. That definitely makes a big difference in how the couple's going to feel throughout the day and the guest experience too, and how you can flow from one thing to the next.
When a couple is bringing you a timeline that they've roughed up, what's one of the more overlooked things that you see?
I think definitely photos can be in there depending on what they're looking for, and if they want to change locations too, because that's something that can take a lot longer than maybe it feels, because even if on a regular day you can technically drive from this place to the next and it only takes 10 minutes, but on the day if you have a bridal party of 20 that you're trying to load into one vehicle, get to that place, unload everyone, get staged for the photos, and then go to another location, that takes a lot longer than it would on an average day. So that definitely can impact.
So they're just
it.
not budgeting the right time for the photos.
Yeah, and you know, they don't see it every day, so they wouldn't necessarily know how much time to allocate for all of those things. But yes, it definitely, that can take a lot longer. Just like shuttling guests can take a lot longer. I think that happens a lot where people want to provide that service for guests. And again, just because the venue is only 5 minutes away doesn't mean that the shuttle service can do like 7 trips in an hour, because it takes a long time to get everyone to find the right location, to get loaded on, then before they can go, and then if anyone has like mobility issues, getting them on and off can take a lot longer. So allocating some of that time sometimes gets a little overlooked at first.
Do you find there's times where you can help a couple cut down their timeline because there's things that maybe will take less time than they expect?
Sometimes, depending on how many makeup artists they have or how many hairstylists they have, like they may anticipate a longer time and it's shorter, but it also could go the opposite way. Or even like ceremony time itself, if it's like an outdoor ceremony, it could go the same way if they have, you know, the officiant is a family member. It could be long and more drawn out because they have a lot to say, but if it's not, maybe it's a little bit shorter, would be my opinion.
Definitely. Toast is another thing that can go either direction. It can either be a lot shorter because people aren't super comfortable in front of everyone and they don't want to talk for a long time, or it can go definitely way in the other direction too, where they're very comfortable with a microphone. and then they have a lot to say. So even if they're told 3 minutes, then maybe they're going to talk for 20. So it can definitely go in either direction. Yeah.
I'm sure in all of your experience in planning and preparing couples for their wedding day, there are certain things that you see other people, you're like, oh, why did they do that with their timeline or something? Are there pet peeves that people can avoid or things that they should know about when it comes to planning?
Just thinking too about not only what it's on their end, so as a bride and groom and the bridal party, I think it's really easy to create your timeline at first from that perspective, but taking a step back and thinking about it from the guest perspective too. Because, you know, if they want to do their photos for 2 hours, let's say in between the ceremony and reception, now as a guest, how does that feel for them? Where do they go? What are they expected to do? Is there enough communication so they know where to go from place to place? I think as a guest, sometimes that can be something that changes how they feel about the day. Like, do they know where they're going? Is that clear? How much time are we really giving between each thing? Even from the time dinner starts to be served to the time that you jump into like those next dances, for example, when the bridal party gets their food is very different than the last table.
Yeah.
And so how much time are they at that table before they're ready to move on to dessert?
Yeah.
You know, sometimes you have to switch roles and think about it from that other side so that it's a good experience for them too, and not just, you know, the other side.
So when they're building a timeline, what are the main things that they should try and build their timeline around? What are the main events of the day?
So usually when I'm talking to a couple about their timeline, I start at the ceremony and work through the rest of the night, and then I go back and I work backwards.
Okay.
So I find that easiest because those are the biggest events that matter the most, are when the ceremony is, and then making sure that there's a good flow between the ceremony and reception, and making sure that they're fitting everything in a flow that feels good, and then really just building it backwards so that we know how early do they need to really get started, and making sure that we give a lot of cushion on the front end of things, because things like hair and makeup sometimes go perfectly on time, and then other times they don't at all because of many factors, but making sure that we have some cushion on the front end there too, especially if there is transportation involved, getting them from place to place and making sure that there's a good amount of room on that side.
So they say it's a cocktail hour when you're in a timeline, but is it usually an hour? Is it always an hour? Is it different?
Yeah, it varies for sure.
Okay.
Sometimes personally I feel like an hour to an hour and a half is a good amount of time for a cocktail hour. 2 hours starts to feel a little long from a guest perspective.
Yeah. How do you decide? How do you guide that decision?
A lot of it has to do with what time do we actually want people eating dinner. Because if, and that really varies on the time of day. You know, if they were at a 3 o'clock wedding, they're really hungry by the time, because they probably rushed through lunch, got dressed, and like drove to wherever the wedding was. And so they probably had a rushed afternoon and now are like super hungry by 6 o'clock. But if you have a wedding that starts at 6, they're okay for a little bit. They're not like ready to eat their arm by 7:30 like some guests are.
And you can use that hour from a planning perspective, you guys can use that hour for like a room flip or different things that that would stretch or shrink that time as well?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, and sometimes if there is a big room flip, then we do need a little bit more time. We do have to use every minute that we possibly can.
Yeah.
So that can vary a little bit too.
And I think like guest count probably drives the length of that cocktail hour as well.
Because 45 people trying to get through, you know, a bar line for a little while, like they're
They'll
good.
blaze right through it.
Yes. Yeah, versus 200 is a big difference.
So when you're creating a timeline, are there key vendors that you always involve in the process or that are more important in decision making?
Definitely. Photographers and videographers for sure. Because you guys, if there isn't a planner in place, you do end up creating that timeline to make sure that you're able to get all the shots in that you need. And it varies vendor to vendor. Some photographers only want X amount of time with the couple, and then other people want a lot more time to do a lot of different locations and stuff like that. So people move at different paces. So just making sure that we're having that conversation of how much time do you want with each piece? Are there special things we need to set aside too? Because for example, if there's like certain interviews that we need to fit in, making sure that that's actually worked in, so that you have that time for it. And then once you get later in the day, I feel like the caterer is also another really big one, because you want to make sure you have hot food served on time. So having that conversation of with their setup and when they're arriving, and how to make sure that we are working toast and everything around so that they are getting that dinner served on time and hot, so that they're not standing there waiting to say like, now our food's cold and there's nothing I can do about it on the day. So making sure we're having conversations ahead of time, for sure.
I think when you lease desert timelines, you kind of build in some time to
wiggle room?
accommodate some
Yes.
wiggle room. Like she may
Yes.
say, like, this is the time that people are going to arrive here, but you give yourself like 5 extra minutes just
do.
in case, and then it kind of like banks for those moments of like a
does.
stressful period.
Usually I'll build in some extra time so that by the time the important thing happens, we're caught up, so that it is okay, so that it doesn't put us too far behind.
So if you're planning a timeline, then that's a key piece to put in some of that wiggle room.
I do.
Are there certain
I
places?
hide a little bit of wiggle room in there sometimes.
People don't know?
They don't always know. Like when I ask bridal party people to show up certain places, I've always put them earlier than I need them. because naturally people run late. Some people are going to follow that to a T, and they're going to show up exactly when they're told, and then other people are late, and that happens. So just giving wiggle room for that, especially for family photos, sometimes that takes a little longer. So giving wiggle room for that, and then especially once we get into the reception, like the exact minute that cake cutting is happening is a little bit fluid. So based on how the flow of the evening is going. So giving some wiggle room for that stuff too, so that no one notices, but at least there's been a plan in place, and then we can all talk on the day to figure out the exact time.
One of my least favorite things is to see a bride that's stressed. At the first part of her day, she's running 15 to 20 minutes behind. Is there advice you would give to a bride or all brides out there to not worry?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, and I hope
Hire a planner.
I was gonna say, sorry, have a planner.
Absolutely.
Makes a big difference, because I think that's why they are so worried, because maybe they didn't build in as much cushion room. When I put what time the bride is getting into her dress on the timeline, it's really so that people are thinking about it and they're moving. But I don't expect my bride to have a watch on. I don't expect her to be double checking exactly what time it is. That's why I'm there, to say like, hey, now's a good time, let's move on to the next piece, so that by the time everyone's actually out the door, we're fine. We're totally okay. They didn't actually get in their dress at the time that we put on there, but it's okay because I built that in there. So having someone else that they can pass off that kind of stuff to does, I think, make a big difference in their anxiety. Yeah, in the couple's anxiety, in the family sometimes too, because there's always someone in the group that is very type A that is really good at keeping people on time, but that's a lot of pressure for them, to make sure that they're moving everyone where they're supposed to move, and there's pieces that they don't see every day because they don't do this every day, so that they might not think of. And I just think that's always hard for me to see when people don't have a planner, is the pressure that it puts on other people. They want to enjoy the day, they want to be there with their favorite people, but they get pulled into all these little questions and all these little things to make sure that everyone, was where they were supposed to be. So having a third party is helpful.
They can be the timeline police and take all that burden away from the bride. That's a big stress relief for her.
Definitely.
Yeah. Well, timelines are a big piece of what we do, and so we super appreciate you guys when you provide those timelines to us. So thank you so much. If people wanted to find you, what's the best way for them to reach out to you?
Through our website, so it's poshpetalsfloral.com, and we have a contact page and a questionnaire for people to fill out so that we can talk to them about all of our different services, because we are full service on planning and floral and design. So then we can help tailor that consultation to what type of service they're looking for.
Well, thank you for watching this important episode on timelines. I hope it was helpful. And if you have questions about timelines, leave a comment below, and be sure to like and share if you found this helpful. And we'll see you on the next episode of Let's Talk Weddings.